excited right now because this is episode 119, super fun, but I'm pumped to bring on Robert Blacklidge. Now, I really love Catalyst people. And if you guys follow the show at all, or if you're in our Facebook group or any of the places you're following things, you guys know I love good principles. I love level ups. The good thing about Robert Blacklidge that I'm just super hyped about is that it's not often that someone has a continuous career touching as many, serving as many entrepreneurs as Robert has had the advantage to do. He's either been support, or he's been coaching, or he's been co-launching, or he's just been consulting entrepreneurs for years, starting way back with the startup bus, which we'll hear a little bit more about that. And then with a stint in Lakeland with Catapult and helping entrepreneurs launch there. And then taking a position, leveling up to Director of Entrepreneurship with Domi Station in Tallahassee. So I'm super excited. We're going to bring him on. He and I were talking before, but what I hope to talk about a little bit is a little bit of his history and what some of his observations have been. But also I want to zero in on some of the top mistakes y'all have been making since the early days. So let's bring Robert on. Here we go. Boom. Hey, man. How you doing?
Doing well. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate you bringing me onto the show.
Yeah, thanks for being here in the middle of the day. And for those who are wondering, here's Robert's information, a Director of Entrepreneurship for Domi Station. You can check out that. Before we talk about some of this history for the viewers and for the recording or whatever, what is Domi Station, Robert?
Domi Station is a co-working incubator located physically in Tallahassee, Florida. But all of our programming is completely virtual, at least until COVID dies down again.
Sure. Yeah. And you've been there now about a year?
We're coming up a little bit over 6-8 months now. So we're coming very quickly on to a year.
And you came right in as Director of Entrepreneurship, right?
I did.
Yeah.
So my background, I have over half a decade helping entrepreneurs start and grow their companies, thousands of individuals, and in a wide variety of roles and formats.
Yeah, man. And so, I mean, we're definitely going to dive in and talk about some of the key crazy mistakes that a lot of us make, and by rationale, what people could be doing better. But working in Startup Bus. Back up to Startup Bus real quick. Was that all first-time entrepreneurs?
Yes and no. So mostly what we focus on for the participants are people who are looking to take advantage or take action on something that they feel very passionate about. That's three main pillars. You have the developer, someone who can actually make the thing, the hipster, the person who can go out and sell it, and then the
hipster
creative. We call them the creative. Yeah, the hipster and the creative. So that's the person who can make it look pretty, because you need somebody who can make it work. We need somebody who can sell it, and you need somebody that makes it look like something that people want to buy.
Now, that sounds like it's a very technology oriented framework. Is that correct?
You would think, and what's really incredible is some of the way. Let me clarify what the Startup Bus is. So 3 days on a bus, and the goal is to launch a company over those 3 days, and then 2 days of pitching in a destination city. Now you're on a bus. There are 8 or 9 other routes from around the country, including Silicon Valley, New York, Mexico, and we all meet in the destination. There's some real key factors. It has to actually work. You have to have sales and traction. So those are kind of the main pinnacles. But what I've seen is there's technological solutions, yes, and a lot of those come out of some of these bigger cities. But even on the Florida bus, we've had physical products where we've stopped at Walmart, purchased materials to build a prototype, and then the technological side was a website for an e-commerce build.
Okay. So you have a developer, but a developer could be, whether it's a web developer or even a product developer, you still have these archetypal roles, you think, of someone selling it, someone developing it, someone, I guess, designing it, making it beautiful. Interesting. And so you did this 2017, 2018, give or take. Is that correct?
2017, I participated, and that was actually the birth of my tech company. Came out of that. And then in 18, I went back, gave back, and helped facilitate the Florida route, as well as support several other routes for the event.
Gotcha. Okay. And for those who totally flamed out, who totally, I mean, if someone's got a good paradigm, they never really fail, right? But when you do this, like if the goal is to launch a business, for those who were really focused on the wrong things, what, from your experience at Startup Bus anyway, did people really get ass backwards? What were they focused on that was just totally the wrong thing?
I think what you see a lot in these events is the opportunity to help overcome those mistakes, right? A lot of times people think they need a thing that works right out the gate. That's the first thing that you have to focus all your energy on, is making the product. Where really the only way you're going to accomplish that in such a short time is to build a team with those different disciplines and delegate across that.
Build a
Because you're
team.
right. And I think Dropbox is one of the best examples of this. They had no software development before they had millions of sales. They built
What?
one YouTube video, launched the video, and had so many people register for the product that they then took that to investors, got the funding to build a product and delivered a service.
Wow. Now, was that, and this is kind of out of Silicon Valley, we have a lot of these like unicorn stories. Was that like the miracle? I think it was Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. Was that just one of these outlier moments? Like it was a good idea, not just a good idea, but it was good timing. What, like, could anyone else replicate that?
Every business can replicate that. That is probably one of the key lessons you can learn as an entrepreneur, is that your product will always change. You're not creating solutions. You're not creating a solution. You're creating solutions to a problem that you're trying to solve. So focusing on what that problem is, the pain point that you're creating a solution for, and letting with some caveats, your customers tell you what they'll pay you for. That is really what's going to drive you to that goal as quick as possible. How do you make that first sale so that you can learn the most, get that feedback on what you're doing, and really start executing?
Interesting. So like a good buddy of mine, we just met, and as you can imagine, like ideas, moderate, mediocre ideas are a dime a dozen, right? Good ideas do take time to percolate, and it really does require a feedback loop. You're talking about getting to the feedback loop as quickly as possible.
As quickly as possible. And this ties into the lean canvas model, and the ideation is that ultimately the person who will give you money for what you're providing is the one you want to provide the most value to, and everyone else is noise. How do you get that feedback and start that sales process?
Yeah. So it's the delusion, right? Like we're talking about the biggest mistake. And this is probably, I mean, would you think this is the top mistake early entrepreneurs make? Like they think that the thing in their head is the best thing since sliced bread?
I think one of the most commons that you'll see is that, well, they love the solution they created, right? And then they go and spend all this money before finding out if there's a customer. How do you avoid that mistake of spending all this energy, time, and effort on a solution that you don't know people want?
Yeah, man. Well, like, so this idea we're having is, obviously we watched like a quick, in the tech space, we watched a quick fall of Parler, for political reasons and obviously rioting reasons. So, the thing that came out of that was we were having this discussion with, a buddy of mine. He's like, what we're really missing is even keeled dialogue. And instead of this de-evolution of debate. So he and I kind of ideated and wireframed an app that follows kind of like a Reddit model of debate, but like what we would consider healthy debate, like dialogue. And we were coming up and we were like, okay, so like, how do we get this thing off the ground? And it's funny because I have some experience as a coach and a consultant, but you have touched at this point, I think, hundreds of startups. And I just kind of backed into, well, I think we just need to get a wireframe and a pitch to some of our closest people and hear if it's something they would even use. Because in all honesty, development's a dime a dozen. If we can scrounge together 2 to 10 grand, I mean, we could come up with an app, but do we know people are going to even care?
Right. And that's what you hit on it. That's the thing that most people forget, is that people have to care about your product, have to be willing to give their hard-earned cash for the solution that you're developing. And especially with the way technology is coming, you can build apps without a single line of code.
Yeah.
You can write code with just a problem that you want solved, and the artificial intelligence will create the code for it. So we're moving very quickly into solutions are going to be very easy to create and iterate. But what is still very difficult is finding something that people will care so much about the solution that you're giving that they'll give you their hard cash for.
Yeah. Now, what percent of the startups that you're touching at Domi Station, just roughly, what percent of them are tech startups versus other startups, physical startups, service startups? What do you think?
I'd say probably a fifth are tech based. A lot of what we do is more service or product based companies.
Really?
One of our biggest successes, Divvy Up, they're now a 100 million plus company, and they provide socks to the really unique socks. But for every sock you purchase, or so many socks, they give one away free to the homeless.
Wait,
So
what's the name of this?
Divvy Up,
DIVI?
DIVVYUP.
DIVVY, Divvy Up. So they have a 1-for-1 model, Tom shoes, but with socks.
With socks.
Interesting. And roughly, what are their revenues? You just mentioned the revenues.
They're over $100 million at this point.
Really? And now, did you watch that whole cycle?
Domi did. Domi saw
did.
that. So that's one of Domi's earlier successes. But what we've seen now is that now entrepreneurs in our ecosystem are able to partner with them. So we just had a partnership announced with a individual who does creative art, works on products. So she partners with artists and brings their art into products. And she has just partnered with Divvy Up. So we're seeing this re-evolution, these really cool cross engagements that wouldn't have been possible with that early success.
Yeah. Do you think, so you strike on something really interesting in your view, your unique position as Director of Entrepreneurship, your unique history has given you an interesting view. I am developing a belief, and I would love to put this on the chopping block for you to either dispel or modify. I'm developing a belief that an entrepreneur or a venture has got to seek growth, or it's just going to close. Like, let me give you context here. I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs are buying into this idea that, oh, I could be a solopreneur and that's good enough. I could come to 100 grand or 500 grand in revenue and that's enough. And like, from a mental health perspective, I want to say, yeah, that's good. But if these companies do not hit traction, or what they call traction, not official traction, but like what they call traction, they're just going to lose interest. Do you think that that is accurate or inaccurate?
I don't believe it's accurate. I think that this country has been developed on those small businesses that are $50,000 to $150,000. That's the majority of businesses in this country, and those are what keep this moving. It's your mom and pop shops, it's your artist, it's your creative, it's the individual with the small pop-up stand. Those are the majority of where jobs are created in this country. What we're talking about, or what you're mentioning on, is that high growth sector, and it's very true there. If you don't have growth in some shape, form, it doesn't have to be revenue, but growth, then you will die off very quickly. But it's a different game. There's the I'm going to be a business that delivers a product and a service, and I'm going to be happy with whatever that goes, and it'll service a provider for me. There's three types of businesses when you really think about it. There's legacy, so building something for your family. And so the way you design and build that is very different than a high growth startup. So one that's going to make me wealthy. So legacy, wealthy. And then finally, the last one is something that you're going to just provide, like a hobby, more of a hobby. So that kind of consistent revenue over time. And so those all have different mechanics that go into creating them and making them successful.
Interesting. And I would love, maybe in another venue or maybe in a follow-up conversation, actually talk about, how does someone know? I mean, some of that's motive, but some of it's also like revenue ranges, like, so like, but I think what's crucial from that is that an entrepreneur be honest with themselves about what they're trying to get out of a particular venture, because there's a lot of emotion attached to, let's just say, like, let's say you had the third option there. I think people beat themselves up when they have like a hobby business, and a hobby business could be what in revenue? Give me an example of like a range of revenue.
It can be anything from it's when I talk about a hobby or a small business, it's enough for you, right? And that number is so specific to the entrepreneur and what they're doing, and can range from millions or $50,000 or just enough to pay your bill, the expenses of the object. So it ranges. But when you're talking about the execution, right, high growth wealth, you want to give away equity as quickly as you can to value for a value trade, right? Whether that's investment or talent or whatever. But hopefully the goal is, yeah, you might have 5% at the end, but that 5% is worth $3 billion.
Yeah.
Then you have the family legacy one. They retain a lot of it because they want to hand it down to their family as a way to give wealth generation.
Yeah.
And then that individual who's just creating a revenue stream for themselves, they again want to hold equity, but they might give a little bit of it up to increase that recurring revenue for their
Interesting.
income.
That's really helpful, because I can even see, like, we have the website company, the bookkeeping company, and then 2020 was going to be all about the training company. 2021, I'm going to be launching more of the training company. And quite often we'll have strategies to incentivize involvement, because it's on other people, and I'll throw out one idea and my wife, Marissa, will go, she'll push against it and have another idea. But you're revealing something, and that is we haven't decided which, I guess in this framework, which we are. And I'm sure that we could probably throw in like nuanced options in there as well. But on a spectrum, those kind of fit pretty clearly on what they are. That's interesting. Now, you mentioned your own startup. And did you exit that startup or close it down?
I've had 10 companies at this point, and so I've had varying exits. Most of them, and I think one thing that you hit on is, did you close it down? That is an exit.
Yeah.
Right? Shutting down a business and moving on is an exit. It's not the one we hope for.
Sure.
The last one was a high tech growth company, and so we ended up we had an investor pull a term sheet after we had already moved to their location. So that's a longer story we can get into in another talk. But that was also the same point where my children were born. So I had the choice of, do I continue this it's not easy. You're out there, you're hitting the pavement, you're talking to investors, you're driving investment into what you're trying to do, or do I kind of pivot back into a more of a, public serving? So that's what made me look for these opportunities as more of a full-time role.
Well, and that's what I liked about your stint at Catapult. There have been, not just at Catapult, but in multiple incubator spaces or co-working spaces even, they'll bring in a community manager and they'll make it seem like this person, and Catapult's not guilty of this today. Kristen Strawbridge is the community manager there, and I think Michelle Harvey also helps out. But in the early days, they were really trying to like serve the entrepreneur community with people that had no real background in entrepreneurship. And so this is what I liked about you, and to this day, one of the legacies I always think about that you left behind in Catapult was Teresa O'Brien. She's a big win of your support and influence in her life. She's a client of ours as well, a website client. And to this day, she's a raving fan of some of the support, or she's at least talked very well of the support she got from you. And I think that's a credit to having a strong entrepreneurship background. And if I know you, you're always going to be firing something up. You have the podcast network going on right now, right?
I do. So what that is essentially, I have an opportunity to provide reduced hosting costs to individuals and connect individuals together locally around the podcast community that they're doing. So we bring in people to our platform at a reduced cost, and it helps them get distribution, helps them raise capital. And essentially what that is a play on everything that I am. Building communities, ecosystem building, connecting people together so they can work collaboratively to be successful.
Yeah, Teresa O'Brien, just FYI, Teresa O'Brien's like, I'm here. She's watching right now. So then what are other types of mistakes? So you've landed on this big mistake of kind of majoring on the minors and thinking you have to have a completed perfect product. What are some of the other like unexpected mistakes that entrepreneurs make in the early days?
There's a really good book called Founder's Dilemma. And so in the
Oh, I've
very
heard that
beginning,
one somewhere. Go ahead.
it goes through all the different examples of what you could do to create that founding team. And that founding team really does designate whether or not your likelihood of success is one way or the other. Uh, some of the most common is family, right? They're the closest to you, they know you, you know them, but there's a difference between the relationship you have as a family and the relationship you need to have as a business or as an employee employer. And so those are some of
Interesting.
the most common, but most likely to fail. Not that they all do, but they do. And then from there, the best or some of the most successful ones are actually coworkers. So finding people that you already work in a work environment with that you get
Ah,
along with and connecting with. In that, an operating agreement that defines who does what, how much they get for that and in exchange. And then typically one thing you don't see very often, but is very powerful is vesting. So once a startup gets their legs under them, this is very common, but in the very beginning, it's missed often. So vesting basically means, look, this is my idea. I'm going
yeah,
to bring you on board. But in order for you to participate and get that equity in the company,
yeah,
you have to work for us doing X for a year. And then you get a large chunk. And then over the next 5 years, you'll get smaller and smaller pieces, but
yeah.
you'll get that equity for your time. And what you see, especially in tech startups, that most people don't last more than a year. People put their toe into it, even in business. Most 90% of businesses fail in the first year.
Yeah.
And it's because it is hard, it is difficult. And one of the biggest misnomers is I'm going to get a job so I don't have, or I'm going to quit my job and start a business so I have freedom and I don't have to work. That's not the case. You have freedom, but you also have the freedom to not work, which
Yeah.
a business doesn't function that way.
You are your own worst boss in the beginning. Yeah.
What I like to think about what a business is it is the hardest you will ever work, but it very clearly lives the expression that when you love what you do, you won't work in it at all. You don't
Yeah.
work a day in your life, right? And
Mhm.
so that is in play when it comes to entrepreneurship. You will,
Mhm.
if you truly love and you're passionate about solving the problem you're going at, you will not work a day in your life, but you will work harder than you've ever worked before.
Yeah. Now, have you seen, I have this idea in my mind. So I had a millionaire mentor. He was a real estate guy who always told me this quote: if you do what you love, you never work a day in your life. And he sincerely loved real estate. I have seen um, entrepreneurs work at something they love, but they never applied the principles. And it was more art even than hobby. It was like looser than hobby. And they have failed. Did they work? Well, maybe not. So I think there's nuance to this quote, right? Like, well, you're going to put in a lot of hours. So what is the nuance? What's back of that quote a little bit?
Yeah. So working on your business and not in your business is the nuance, right?
Got it.
People get lost. You are not as a business owner, you're not you in the beginning you will be an employee of the business. You have to
Yeah.
be, right? You are the full circle of everything that happens. And if it doesn't happen, it's because you didn't do it, right?
Yeah.
But the sooner that you can move from working in the business to on the business, the more effective you'll be as a business owner. And Teresa O'Brien is a really good example of
Mm.
this. She was the employee. She called herself the Tuesday girl. She would go around to small businesses and help them weekly on tasks for an hourly rate.
Mm.
And Help Her is an evolution of that, of her no longer working in the business, but empowering others to be those Tuesday girls and her working on the business to create those connections between others who need that service and others who can provide that service.
Yeah. Now, okay, so this leads me to a very, I think, burning question for a lot of entrepreneurs, even those who are in it right now. Do you think, in your vast experience, there are natural born entrepreneurs and not that determine success?
I think we are all born natural entrepreneurs, right? Because entrepreneurship, in my definition, is thinking outside of the box, problem solving, and not giving up until you create a solution that works well. And if you want any uh, proof, right? The proof is looking at a child learning to walk.
Okay.
Every single human being on this face of this planet started out on the ground and spent months of their lives figuring out how to go from 4 arms to 2 legs. And that process is falling over and over and over and
Mm,
learning each time. That is entrepreneurship. And I mean, that is it, right? You're going
yeah.
to fail time and time again, but you have to learn from that mistake, to what you're doing, and evolve. And that is, I think, born into all of us. We have some education that I mean, grade school for 100 years has been creating warehouse workers and factory workers, and
Yeah.
that is so mundane. And entrepreneurship just doesn't. That you have to A plus B equals C every single time. And entrepreneurship is not that. Is A plus question mark equals what? That's entrepreneurship.
Yeah. Well, and I do think there are, well, let me rephrase that. I used to think that there were like magic temperaments that were born for entrepreneurship. And then I was thinking, then I started evolving to think, you know what, I'm meeting some people and they're just not cut out for this. And then I started realizing, I think it's timing. Like there's certain moments in an entrepreneurship when we can use the hammer, the accelerator. My temperament's A types who just drive, drive, drive. But then like there are very important moments. And I think a lot in the website company, I am not a good operator. I know this. And a lot of the people around me are far better operators. And so there's a moment where my voice should be the dominant voice. But I think there's another moment when the dominant voice needs to be those detail-oriented operators who I believe everyone has the same motive. And I think in the early days, I didn't believe that not the betas, but the detail-oriented people, the true operators, I used to believe that they didn't want what I wanted. Like growth in entrepreneurship, but I'm starting to believe, no, I think we do want the same things. I just think that we're different tools. So what's your sense of when the range should be shifted from the traditional A types to managers?
As quickly as possible.
You get out of here, entrepreneurs, get out of here.
So there's yeah, I mean, there's probably a people that are dispositioned to be entrepreneurs, but most of them, some of the successful ones aren't these innovation ideation people. They're actually more likely somebody who's risk adverse and very detail oriented. Those are
Yeah.
the people that are more likely to be successful because there is a ton of details, right? The
Yeah.
way that you think about, or you can think about a business, is a pie, right? A circle.
Mhm.
And as you start, you own the whole pie. You have to put all the filling in, you have to put all the pieces, you have to do it. But when you're looking at growing a company and expanding that, you have to start defining the processes that go into making that pie.
Mhm.
Somebody needs to mix the ingredients. And so to mix that ingredients, you have to do X, Y, and Z. You have to marketing, right? For a business. I have to create content. I have to put it at these places. I have to define it. So your role as an entrepreneur, as a founder, is defining the pie and then defining the pieces of the pie so you can delegate that to somebody who is an expert or qualified at it or is stronger than you, right? Your weaknesses, where your strength and weaknesses lie, are integral to the success of your business.
Hmm.
And the easiest way to figure that out is, what are the things you hate doing but
Yeah.
you know have to happen,
Yeah.
right? Define it, clarify what it is, and then take that and delegate it to somebody who loves that and has a passion for it and wants to do that day in and day out. And
Mhm.
that is what you've seen, right? You started out, you had this pie. These are things that weren't really good, and you handed those off to somebody who loved those pieces and
Yeah.
like enjoyed doing it, and you saw explosive growth from that because we all bring different tool sets to the table.
Yeah.
And that is kind of what that figuring out what tool set complements your tool set and fitting
Yeah.
them into the piece that can take over the parts that you don't like to do will help you move forward quickly.
That's really good. So well, back up. That just needs to be called out. So we're talking about the early mistakes people make. And by early, I mean not early in your career, early in the venture. And I cannot tell you how many times. In fact, I would tell you every time I have done a venture that has fallen apart. It's fallen apart because I delayed my attention to learning the skill of handing the reins over successfully. Not just handing the reins over, I've done that, but to do that well even takes its next level skill. And with in 2021, the way we're doing things, my sole focus is getting better at delegating. And I know that sounds so rudimentary. Like, I've been at this thing. I think I've only been an entrepreneur except a short stint working for Starbucks. And then, like, had teenage jobs at Pure One Imports and stuff like that. And then I worked at Starbucks for a stint in my late 20s. But like, I've only ever been an entrepreneur. And you would think that I would be the 7-8 figure dude. But I'm telling you, where I have dropped it, I've got the temperament for it. I've got the personality for it. I wish people would just pimp me out like a piece of meat as a personality, right? And it's just not how it is, because I have dropped the ball time and again. At first, all in my 20s, I dropped the ball on just delegating it all. Then in my 30s, my wife and I were doing missions. And then we came back and started doing entrepreneurship and everything there. I was a coach and trainer, and coaching and training, you still feel like you should be the guy who knows all the answers because you're a coach and a trainer and a consultant. Shouldn't you have all the answers, which means you should wear all the hats? So I just repeated the same mistakes. So we have a whole new team now, and I'm literally trying to make this skill, ingrain it in my brain. So are there tools or resources, whether they're Domi tools or just Robert's pet tools he loves, on making sure you're delegating well, or frameworks even?
Really the Enneagrams and understanding how people work well together is not, it comes natural to some people, but for the most individuals, you're learning that. It's a learned skill, the ability to, and this is some of the best advice that I've heard, is you have to treat everyone differently, right? The way
Yes,
you
that's
engage
good.
someone is different. Each person is completely different. And if you can get really effective at doing that,
Yeah.
understanding and empowering people to pursue what their dreams are,
Yeah.
you have, so think of it this way, right? In retail, it's one of the worst examples, but also some of the best. Most of the time, you're just getting that person to have a smile and ring
Yeah,
that customer's stuff up as quick as possible.
exactly.
And it works that way. And most of the time it is. But what's really magical is when you inspire them to be more, to make that person stay and to be a part of that person's life, even if it's just for a moment.
Yeah.
The experience does a 180. It's no longer, and there are companies that do this really well at certain locations, but not all. It's hard to scale, right? Now we're
Yeah.
talking about the relationship, and it really matters on that individual and how they feel that day. But when you're talking about how do you do this as an individual and as a team, get
Yeah.
really good at inspiring people, because that's what you have to do every day. Their tasks are their tasks, and they'll be there, and they'll never go away, right? Whether they're doing it, somebody else is doing it, or you're doing it, the task of the task is a task. But
Yeah.
what can change is the motivation they have when they approach those tasks, and a positivity, an energy of a positive outcome
Yeah.
will drive them to the solution quicker and happier, and you'll get better results.
Well, and what's interesting about this is just temperamentally, I thrive on vision. Like you could paint a vision, I thrive on that. And that was one of the things I realized I was doing wrong or overly much. With our last team, in the early days, we sold a lot of vision. And I don't mean like shilling it or being manipulative or weird, but we just sowed a lot of vision because that is the direction we are going. And half the time when I get up and share vision, I'm actually trying to make sure I'm running in a straight line. But what we realized is it was too much vision because the team was trying to fulfill the 5 and 10 year vision instead of the core work. And to
Mm.
their credit, that was their motive. They wanted to serve me. And so like they were just trying to serve, but I could, it was never enough. And Grant's always asking for more. And so in our new round, we're trying to do what you're talking about. And it's a question I'm constantly talking with Marissa, my wife, about. How do we inspire without vision, or with less vision, like controlled vision? Go
Yeah,
ahead. What's your thought there?
and
You have a thought?
this is really interesting, and you see this being very impactful in your personal life. You can apply the same methodology, right? 3 things a day, what are the three most important things that you have to accomplish? And
Mm-hmm.
how does that tie into your ultimate goal? So when you sit down and vision cast, you're setting that 3 to 5 year vision. But
Yes.
you have to break that down into what are we doing this month?
Yeah.
What are the goals we're trying to achieve? And then celebrate them if you accomplish them.
That's
So
good.
break it down as small and minuscule. I think it's how do you climb a mountain one step at a time?
Yeah.
That is what you have to bring to it. It's great that you see the mountain and that you want to climb it and you want to scale it and you want to get to the top. That's what motivates you and keeps you going. But
Yeah.
in order to do that, you have to know that, it's going to take 5 months and we're going to have to take these steps and we have to get to these lower peaks by this time to really be on track to make it by this goal. So goal setting, milestones, tearing down those pieces into consumables, and
Yeah.
then define, look, these are the three things. If I get these done, it was a good day. There's a 50
Yeah.
things that have to happen. These are the top three. This is what I'm going to focus on today. And if I feel like it, I'll do more.
Yeah.
And
That's
there's
good.
a lot of different ways to accomplish this. There's a lot of ways to different apply it. But one of the most interesting found or recently did a study on your ability to study or be effective in a time frame. And essentially, it's like this big curve, and it drops off after 30 minutes. It goes way
Yeah.
down. But if you go for 30 minutes and it starts to drop off, and then you take a 5 minute break, it almost comes back to 100%. So
Yes, I have seen something similar. Now,
over
did you
for
say you
5 hours,
just did this study?
I didn't do it, but it just came out.
Got it.
So
Yeah.
this implementation of it essentially means that if you have those three goals and you do 30 minutes of it and you take a 5 minute break, go do something fun, listen to a song you love, and then come back, you'll
Yeah.
be able to execute on those goals much more effectively than if you just worked on one for 5 hours.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and yeah, that's huge. And the tough thing about that is for me, I do this. I use Evernote to control my brain, and I have like a whole getting things done. I don't know if you remember Getting Things Done method. It was a great book that came out in the early 2000s, but technology and Evernote for me has really made a lot of productivity come out of this. So I always do a daily top 5, and I do this internally, but it does not motivate me, and I do not get a dopamine bump from getting my top 5 done because I know my vision, there's always more, but I am anchored to the dopamine of the always more. That's the thing that keeps me going. That's why I love business. Like the game, the goalpost always moves, and I like that. I realize other temperaments, most people are not wired that way. They're wired to be motivated with what you're talking about. Did I get my 3 things done? Do you find that that's true across the board in the entrepreneurs you've been exposed to? Just daily wins?
I think you're going to have a different execution of this no matter who you are, right? Everyone has to own it. And when I give these advice and these tools and these different effects, there is a personal implementation of it that you have to learn what's effective for you. But
Mhm.
what's valuable with a lot of these is they're based on a human psyche, right? And they're based on the implementation. So they work for the majority of people.
That's interesting. And Ryan Edrington is a millionaire. I just or he's building $1 million company that I just interviewed the other day. Robert, you would really like Ryan. He's actually a low key, non-A type, but consistent entrepreneur. He's been awesome, and he just mentions the Full Focus Planner by Michael Hyatt. I just came across that one, and I was interested, but there's like a million of these, and if I grab one, it's just a rabbit hole for my ADD brain. But I know that Ryan's made good use of that. Do you personally use any kind of organizational method or tool for all the projects you're working on, Robert?
So I love digital tools. I like Trello. I like to put things in my Google Calendar and keep notes of what I'm doing. I
Yeah.
did just order one, and you'll have to excuse me. I'm actually going to look it up. I follow
Yeah.
this entrepreneur on TikTok, and he's going from $1 to $1 million over a period of time. And I
Just
don't know if
follow
you
him along. I was thinking about
do.
doing
I
that,
just
man. I
follow
need to
along
follow you on
on those.
TikTok, man. What's it
Yeah,
called?
I don't have it. I apologize.
We'll
I
post in the
have to
comments later.
will. But what I like, what inspires me, right? And this is again, you have to take it to your own personal likes, interests, and excitement.
Yeah.
What inspires you? And so for you, it's that larger vision. For me, it's supporting other entrepreneurs. So he came out with this planner, and I liked his methodologies. I agreed with what he was saying. A lot of what I say, he was echoing, and so I supported him by buying his planner. But the
Yeah.
goal, it breaks it down. It's the same thing. It's those, you could do this on a piece of paper. You could do it on a whiteboard. You could do it in a Trello. You could do it in a Google Doc. It's what matters for you and
Yeah.
what's effective. If it doesn't work, change it. Don't get stuck in, oh, I got this planner. It has me do this. And you know what? I'm not getting anywhere. Throw it out, put it away, use it for something else. Find what works for you and allows you to be effective. And there's two things that really matter. Self-care is integral. If you don't take care of yourself, it won't matter if you get to the goal line, because you'll die before you get halfway there, right? So
Yes.
including your self-care is in, listen to your body, listen to what your mind is saying. If it's too much today, don't do it. Go take a personal day. If it's too much from that hour, go sit down and have a cup of coffee or read a book and a cup of tea. That is integral to your personal growth and your success.
Like
And
your
then
5 minute
everything.
breaks you were mentioning, entrepreneurs think grind or die means I push past the curve when I have diminishing returns. But there's even beyond the 5 minutes. I fully agree. If you have to get up and go to a coffee shop, it feels like, but Grant, there's so much to do. Man, I've had to learn
Doesn't
the
go
hard.
away. It doesn't go away. And that's the I think as a first time founder or your first time venture, there was always so much to do in entrepreneurship. There
Yeah.
is nothing that will ever you're always going to have that next mountain to climb, that next hill. There's the goals, setting goals help you keep the vision in line, helps you to stay on track, helps you to move forward. Because what happens, and what you see time and time again, is the mountain looks so big that you don't take a step. And you
Hmm.
sit there and you stare at that first stone in front of you that you have to step over, and you don't go anywhere. But
Yeah.
if you just sit down and say, look, okay, I'm gonna catch my breath, I'm
Yeah.
gonna focus, I'm gonna center myself, and then I'm gonna climb that next hill,
Yeah.
you're able to move. And that's what we're talking about,
Yeah.
defining the hills that you have to climb so that you can see where you're going and you're
Hmm.
not spinning all around them, because that'll happen too. You might be in a field of mountains, right, or a field of
Yes.
hills, and you're not sure which hill to go over to get to the top of the peak. So
Yeah.
helping you clarify the direction you're going, goals are your compass, and self-care is the energy you need to climb that hill.
Yeah, man. There's a Haitian phrase from the time we spent. We spent about 5 years working in Haiti, and then we moved to the Dominican Republic for a year. And the Haitians have a phrase that basically translates "mountains beyond mountains," and it's almost like a nihilistic statement they say to each other, "mountains beyond mountains." But to them, it actually encourages the motion, because they know, hey, there's always going to be mountains beyond mountains. Quit changing your focus, put a foot in front of the other, and let's get there, son. And so it's kind of like this rustic shade tree wisdom of, hey, there's like a Zen paradox to accepting there is no end here. And for a lot of temperaments, I want to circle back to like your three things. I think that's really important, because I think those who I used to think were natural entrepreneurs and not natural entrepreneurs, and I stand corrected, and I've been correcting myself on this, but I think those who I were ascribing that to were those who needed to focus on the three things versus the big vision. And I think it's most people that do need to look at the steps in front of their feet and get rewarded, celebrated, and loved on. I think that's the average, not just entrepreneur, the average person, I think absolutely
Well, and it's not,
needs that.
so for you, you need to see the mountains,
I
right?
do. I do.
That's perfectly fine. It's the same methodology, just with a different execution,
Yeah. No, you're
right?
totally right. Because in the end, what's got to happen is I've got to put my feet in front of the other. They've got to put their feet in front of the other and have a positive culture along the way, you know? Um,
Enjoy
so
the journey. It's
yeah, some
you
Zen
gotta
crap.
enjoy the
True.
journey.
Yeah, but that's true, because I think with the grind or die entrepreneur culture, there's only the arrival. It's the myopia of focusing on the arrival, and I've never seen that produce happy people. I
And
rarely.
you can go back and ask them, and you know what, especially if you catch. So it's interesting with watching entrepreneurs and having seen a lot of entrepreneurs grow, is you get to hear the reasons for doing whatever, and what does success look like for them.
Yeah.
And what's really interesting is when you get there, a lot of times it's changed. It's
Yeah.
not what they thought it was. And it's next hill, or they've already accomplished it and they've done more than they thought they were even capable of. And that, I think, is what's powerful about entrepreneurship, and also what's so scary. You don't know what you're capable of, and I
Yes.
am here to tell you that you are capable of so much more than you ever thought possible. You
Yes.
just have to execute.
Man, okay. Okay. I was literally going to wind the show up with going, what's your one piece of advice? But I think we're going to land there, because I say this, and you and I have very different temperaments, but I think we have very similar motives, which is why I've always had this low-key appreciation of who you are. And that quote right there, you are capable of so much more than you could imagine. You just got to get to taking action. I'm going to call a timeout on that and just end there, because I think that's awesome. I love it. To everyone watching, you got to check out Robert. Robert, where would you prefer people check you out or follow you?
Sure. So I have a public figure page on Facebook. You can definitely follow me there. I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, you name it. One of the really interesting things is I've worked really hard for you to be able to Google me.
Yeah.
And so a lot of my content is Googleable.
Yeah, man. Well, I am very confident that we're going to have some subsequent conversations, because I think we have a lot to unpack, and I think we have a lot to discuss, and we have similar worldviews. So I'd love to check that out. For those of you watching, remember the mission today: igniting lives of explosive significance, starting with your own. Thanks for stopping by, and thank you, Robert. We'll be talking after the show a little bit, but thanks to the rest of you. Go out there and make an impact today.